You're listening to the Study Legal English podcast, helping lawyers and law students become fluent in legal English. For more information, visit studylegalenglish.com. Hello and welcome to the Study Legal English podcast. I'm your host Louise, and today I'm talking to Michael Lindner. Now, I know that you're all very well-informed, intelligent legal professionals, and you probably know who Michael Lindner is. But even if you don't know his name, maybe you've heard of a couple of books. For example, a book called The Introduction to International Legal English, or another book, International Legal English. Maybe you've heard of ILEC, the Cambridge International Legal English Certificate, or perhaps you've heard of something called the World Law Dictionary. Well, Michael is the CEO of TransLegal, and TransLegal is the international company behind all of those products that I just mentioned. TransLegal is a company that does legal translations and also provides various products and services for the legal and legal English world. Now, I've been speaking quite a lot recently to Michael because we are working on some collaborations together. You, my listeners, are going to find out all about these in the show. And to give you a clue about an upcoming collaboration that we've got going, it involves me, Michael, and potentially you. Yes, you, my special listeners, and a whole lot of legal English. So I'm very excited about it, and you're going to hear all about that in the show. So today we're talking about TransLegal, and we're going to find out about, of course, these collaborations that we're working on, and as well some resources which can help you. Some of them are free, which I'm sure you're very happy about. Some of them are paid, but I've got some discount codes for you. So listen out for those in the show. So now let's go. So, hello, Michael Lindner. How are you?
I'm fine. Hi, Louise.
Nice to have you on the show. I'm very excited to talk to you today about TransLegal, the World Law Dictionary, all of those things. So tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get to what you're doing today?
We'll take a long story and try to make it a little shorter. I'm from the States, from New York. I grew up in New York, went to school, university there, studied law, worked for a couple of years at a law firm, but always had this hankering, as we say in the States, to move to Europe. Met a Swedish girl and moved to Sweden a long time ago, over 30 years ago. So I was young in my career practicing law, and I didn't really know what I was going to do in Sweden. I mean, it's difficult to apply the legal system of the United States to Sweden. It doesn't apply, so it was difficult to find employment. And which actually was the germ of the entire idea behind TransLegal, is that these legal systems are different, and their Swedish legal system is very local, and it's very based in the Swedish language. I didn't speak Swedish at that time, and I wasn't a Swedish lawyer, so there wasn't any employment. But I was contacted by a bank in the beginning, big Swedish bank, the legal department, and they asked me if I could start teaching them legal English. So I said, well, what harm could it do? And so I started teaching them legal English. And then I realized very quickly that back then in the mid 80s, there was just like nothing as far as material is concerned to teach legal English, course books or anything. So I started putting together course books for teaching legal English. We study in America and Britain too. We study case law. We study in law school from the case system. And so I started putting together cases on company law and contracts that they could read the cases and discuss the cases. And we focus on vocabulary, things like that. And I wasn't a language teacher, so I had to read about that and figure out how to do that. But they liked it enough. So it grew and grew and grew. And then to make the long story shorter, I started hiring a few people and took off from there as far as the teaching is concerned. And then translations came in later.
The Swedish legal system, do they have a common law system or a civil law system?
Like most countries in the world, it's a civil law system. I mean, the only countries in the world that have a common law system are the English-speaking countries, former colonies of Britain. So everyone else has a civil law system, which is different. not entirely different, but it's different. So you have this question of comparative law. You're comparing Swedish civil law legal concepts to English concepts. Swedish lawyers are trying to express their legal concepts in English, which can be difficult. Certain things are quite easy, straightforward. Other things can be very, very difficult. There is no equivalent. And then they have to explain that in English. So I went from the teaching, we taught courses in legal English. Then they started asking if we could translate documents. By then, my Swedish was getting pretty decent, and my colleagues too. So we started doing translation work, which really gets into the nuts and bolts, because then you really get into trying to explain Swedish legal concepts in English and translate them into English.
What kind of documents were you translating?
So it was mostly business legal documents, so shareholder agreements, articles of association, licensing contracts, a lot of corporate stuff, M&A documents. We worked for big law firms, banks, insurance companies, a lot of big companies. Eventually, we were contacted by a big legal publisher here in Sweden to translate legislation. And so we started that almost 30 years ago, probably 25. And that's expanded enormously. So now we translate a large chunk of Swedish commercial legislation and update it every time Parliament updates the legislation. So, but mostly business related, I would say.
Do they publish the legislation in English?
Yes. Initially it was in paper and binders, and now it's all digital. It's a database subscription for law firms.
So you set up TransLegal in the late 80s?
It's 1990, I say. Yeah, it was
Okay.
the first year we started. And then by 93, 4, then I started opening offices in Paris and in Frankfurt and in Madrid, and hired people there to do teaching. And then they went into translations.
So tell me, what is TransLegal?
What it is, it's a language company for the international legal community. So we provide language products and services for the international legal community. Every country in the world that doesn't have English as a native tongue, their lawyers need to learn English, they need to use English, they need to have documents translated. English is a lingua franca of international commerce, and so international law is practiced almost exclusively in English. And it's very difficult. Practicing law, it's all words. It's science has tools and medicines and technology. Law is just words. I mean, the only technology that's helped the legal community is pushing those words around really faster and in a more organized fashion, but somebody still has to come up with the actual words. And so for a lawyer, her tools are really, the language of the law. So to do that in English, the only thing harder than that would be maybe writing poetry in a foreign language. But practicing law in a foreign language is very difficult. It's difficult enough in your own language, expressing yourself properly and accurately with no room for mistakes. That's very difficult. It makes people very uncertain. So both teaching legal English and translation of legal documents is very important for the international legal community.
So TransLegal, has it changed over time as well?
Yeah, certainly has changed. The original idea behind TransLegal was the teaching, and then we got into the translations. Then the translations became the large part of the business very quickly. It was more lucrative, quite simply. So translations took over, and that became the very big part of the business. But then with the dawn of the internet, the company got into teaching more and testing. So we had an idea for a test of legal English. We approached Cambridge University, and they ended up doing a partnership with us for years, the ILEC, International Legal English Certificate.
A lot of the listeners know about ILEC. Some of them, they've taken it in the past. For listeners who don't know what it is, it's the International Legal English Certificate. And so, yeah, I am talking to the man behind that.
Lucky you. Yeah, so that was a pretty fantastic experience for us. I mean, we did it for, I don't know how many, 7 or 8 years. And that really launched, I think, TransLegal as an international company. And it was really an honor doing a partnership with Cambridge University, such a prestigious university, one of the most prestigious in the world. So that was terrific. And then we also were contacted by Cambridge University Press to write 2 course books in legal English. Originally one, then the second one. They became the biggest selling course books in the world for legal English for many years. And that really established name recognition for our company globally. I travel around the world now and I meet with people, lawyer, linguists, and professors and English teachers, and they always say, "Oh, I have a copy of your book." And my sister Amy wrote the book with us. She's a language teacher at the University of Vienna, English for special purposes teacher there.
Again, the listeners know those books. Informally, they're referred to as the Red Book and the Blue Book. But most of the listeners, they know those books. The first one's called The Introduction to Legal English, and the next one is International Legal English.
Right, exactly. The Red Book is International Legal English, which is at a higher level, and the Blue Book is the intro, the lower level. So those books and the Cambridge tests were really important for establishing us internationally. And about the same time, internet started to get more sophisticated and what you could do with it. So we started looking to doing online courses to help people with legal English. And we focused on vocabulary courses at that time. So we started making courses in company law and contracts, intellectual property, courses for LLM students, and kind of an introductory course in legal English, but all focused on vocabulary as opposed to skills. The vocabulary courses are specifically just to build your vocabulary in a specific area of the law. They're totally online self-study. You just sit there and you work through exercises to increase your vocabulary, while the course books were 4 skills for reading, writing, speaking, and listening to prepare people for the Cambridge test or to practice the law in English. Unfortunately, the test didn't sell enough globally. It's a very expensive undertaking, so you need a big market for it. But in that process, we learned a lot about testing and how to prepare a test, how to make a test. So what happened actually was, since the ILEC test ran to the end of its life cycle, the Cambridge University Press decided to no longer publish the course books to prepare people for that particular test, which gave TransLegal, as the authors of the book, a fantastic opportunity to take all of that brilliant content and put it online. And especially with the pandemic now, so many legal English teachers around the world need to teach remotely. So the timing was absolutely perfect. I think a lot of people have discovered how nice it is and easy it is, and actually at times better to teach remotely. So we decided anyway to take the course materials from these 2 course books plus a lot more and create an entire e-learning package, which is really a program of 4 skills: reading, writing, speaking, and listening, a program to help language schools and universities around the world to provide legal English training to their students. And that's meant to be a teacher-led course.
Yes. And listeners, I have a very exciting announcement to tell you about this. The online courses that Michael's talking about, so the Red Book and the Blue Book that have now been turned into kind of teacher-led courses, well, I am very excited that I'm going to be a teacher leading one of those online courses, which is a fantastic opportunity for me as a teacher, and also for you if you're interested in improving your legal English, which of course all of you are, because that's why you're listening to this podcast. Keep an eye out for announcements through my podcast, because I'll give future details of when those courses are going to take place. So I'm very excited about that, and I'm super happy to be collaborating with Michael on that particular opportunity.
Yeah, I'd like to tell your listeners that it's also for TransLegal an honor to be working with you, Louise, and we really look forward to your teaching the course through TransLegal and using our materials and working with you for hopefully many years.
Thank you. And for listeners, I know a lot of you are quite familiar with the Red and the Blue Book, but the aim of the course is to really to give you an assessment of where you are now with your legal English, and then to really take you to the next level and to give you a very good knowledge of different areas of legal English, your vocabulary, but also practicing all of the skills, your reading, your speaking, bit of writing, and of course, listening.
Yeah, and I should say at this point too that we call it a course book, but now we've actually started calling it the Legal English Lab. So it's actually an entire program. So it starts with an online test, and you can test reading, writing, speaking, and listening online. And then you find out what level you are based on the Council of Europe scale. So there's the initial test, and then the entire course, all the materials for that, and then a test at the end. And there are also the vocabulary courses, which are available if you want to self-study during the same time. And on top of that, there's the World Law Dictionary as a resource.
So this lab is pretty interesting because you're talking about, you've got several products available on your website and you're offering them in a kind of package, which is a very nice package. I would like that. But tell me about it. Can people sign up to it now?
Yeah, sure. So the lab is really four different products. So it's the testing, the online testing of your legal English skills, plus the course book, the digital course book, plus the vocabulary courses for self-study, and the World Law Dictionary. So it's all those put together in a package. And for university students, the price is only €50. And if you compare that to the course books, the Cambridge course books, they cost close to €50, just the course book alone. There was no test, there was no dictionary, there were no online vocabulary courses, and there wasn't the wealth of material that we have in our digital course book. So the price for universities is very low. For language schools, it's higher, but there are discounts for language schools, group discounts. Language schools can make commissions on this as well. So it's really a dynamic package of learning and testing materials and resources for the price of a course book.
It's very, very reasonable. And you mentioned that when we start running these teacher-led courses, obviously the teacher-led courses aren't going to be €50, I'm afraid, listeners, but you'll have to keep an eye out for the pricing and the dates. But if you do sign up to the course, then you'll get access to this lab as well.
Exactly. That's included in the course, of course.
So that's fantastic. So you'll have access to the supporting resources as well that you can kind of self-study on your own. Because I know lots of you listeners, I'm sure you're very dedicated and you just want to study legal English all the time. Well, you'll be able to do this with the Legal English Lab. Doesn't it sound good? A nice loss of alliteration there. Good. I'm glad you mentioned the World Law Dictionary, because that's also something else that I wanted to talk to you about. And also the listeners are aware, the regular listeners are aware that we've got a collaboration now on the World Law Dictionary, but I haven't really explained much about what the World Law Dictionary is. So tell me a little bit about the World Law Dictionary.
Well, the World Law Dictionary is actually the product that lies closest to my heart, I think, since I've been translating for so many years. So the World Law Dictionary is a hugely ambitious project, actually, and maybe a little crazy ambitious. But anyway, so the idea was, as I translate legal documents from Swedish to English over the years, I realized how funny it is that there's no agreement here in Sweden, and then it turns out anywhere in the world really, on what legal terms, civil law terms are to be called in English. Our English vocabulary is all influenced, of course, by the fact that it grows out of the common law system. So now you have to explain civil law concepts using common law terminology. And even that part aside, the civil and common law differences, there's just no agreement. There's no standardization on what legal terms would be called in English. And I know the Swedish lawyers here, Sweden's a very international country with a lot of big international corporations that people know of. But still, even the sophisticated legal departments and law firms didn't agree on what to call certain Swedish legal concept after all these years. And so that seemed very odd to me. And then I found out it was the same situation in Germany and China and Brazil and Poland and everywhere in the world. It's just funny. Nobody ever sat down and said, okay, this Polish legal concept is going to be called this in English. And that was never worked out. And I thought that's just odd. Everything is governed by a legal system. So why is there no agreement on what we're going to call things? Why would you have that kind of uncertainty in a legal system opening up for litigation, people drafting contracts in a foreign language in English, and then they have no place to look it up with any kind of authority and say, oh, that's what it's called. It has to be that because that's in the World Law Dictionary, which we called it. So the problem was quite obvious there, that there's uncertainty in a very important part of the world. And then the answer is trickier because how do you actually then decide on what things are going to be called? So I thought to myself, well, it really has to be one single database, and people have to meet like a committee almost, where people discuss things. I mean, you can have, for example, a Spanish legal concept that is translated into one thing in English in Spain. It's not even uniform within Spain, but anyway, let's say that it is. And then next door in Portugal, you could have the same exact legal concept, because their legal systems have similar origins, but it's translated into something else in English because in Portugal, they just happened to call it something else. The translators there started calling it something else. Well, this is very confusing for somebody who's coming from Japan, starting a company in Spain and one in Portugal, and they're going to do the same thing. And then they go to the lawyers in Spain, then they go to lawyers in Portugal, and the Portuguese are telling him something about this Portuguese legal concept. And it says, that sounds vaguely familiar, but the Spanish were calling it something else. hours are wasted, time is wasted, money's wasted, uncertainty is infused into the system. It doesn't really make much sense. So why don't the Spaniards and the Portuguese agree that when we call this same legal concept something in English, we'll call it the same English? And then the same thing could be true of, for example, the Japanese civil code is based in large part on the German civil code. So Japanese legal concepts are very close to German legal concepts. And when I was in Tokyo meeting with our partner university there, the professors were telling me, we know what these terms are called in German, but we don't know what they're called in English. Big Japanese law firms need to be able to explain things. It can be in German, but most of the time now it's in English. So the idea was that there needed to be some kind of single database with agreement. But then I had to figure out, who would even agree on it? That's really a hard thing. So I decided that the best way to do it would be to go to universities, get big law faculties involved, and have them put their stamp of approval on it, put their input into it, and then agree on it. So we started doing that. Another long story made shorter. And now we have, I think, a dozen law faculties in China and Germany and Brazil and Norway and all over. But we've launched 6 languages already, and we have another 5 or 6 to be launched towards the end of this year, beginning of next year, and the new universities are joining all the time. So it's starting to take off. As I travel around the world and meet with people, professors and law students and lawyer linguists, it's the same story. There's this need for agreement, uniformity, and then there's a need to not only translate these terms into English, but also explain these concepts in English, because some of these concepts cannot be translated into just one word or a few words. There is no equivalent in English.
Listeners, if you've never been onto the World Law Dictionary on the TransLegal website, you can go to translegal.com. You can enter a particular term like jurisdiction, for example. You can do English to English, which obviously isn't a translation, but what you will get is the particular word, you'll get a definition, you get examples, you get phrases using this particular terminology. There's a free version that's got a limited amount of information there, and then there's this paid version as well, where you get a lot more access to further examples and things like that. And then also you can, as Michael was explaining, translate a term. So you might have a term in Spanish or in English and you want to translate it into the other language. And it will give you a translation and an accurate translation, because I think, Michael, a lot of listeners, they are in the situation that you exactly described. They want to translate terms, but they're not really sure where to find accurate translations. And that is a real problem, because we can access so much stuff on the internet, but a lot of it is not great quality. And so, of course, as you mentioned, a lawyer's tools are the words, right? And so it's really, really important to get accurate words. And so I do recommend to listeners to check out the World Law Dictionary, because it's a very high quality resource, and it's an incredible collaboration between universities. If other universities want to get involved in this, what do they do?
Well, yeah, just contact us. We get inquiries all the time from universities. So we usually choose one university from each language, for each country. Actually, it's not language, it's country. So we have a university partner in Portugal, and we have one in Brazil. So there's a Brazilian Portuguese, and there's a Portuguese. So all they have to do is contact us. There's contact information on our website at translegal.com, and we'd be happy to talk to them about being a partner in the project.
Currently, what languages are there on the World Law Dictionary?
So we've launched Chinese, Brazilian Portuguese, Norwegian, Hungarian, Polish, and German. And we're in the process, we have Spanish, French, both in Quebec and in France, Italian, Turkish, Japanese, several more production as well. And what you said is very important about there's a lot on the internet. Yeah, you can just get stuff for free looking up translations, but you can't rely on it. That's the problem. It's like news sources. I subscribe to the New York Times and the Guardian because, I can get free news on the internet. I can read free news on Facebook, but you know what kind of that's going to be. So, the internet is great. There's a lot of free stuff on it. But if you really want quality, then you have to pay for that quality. Not a lot of money. The World Dictionary is very modest cost. But you know that when you're using something in a legal document, that it's been vetted by professors and lawyer linguists. So yeah, it's one thing to just look for something and get it free on the internet. It's another thing to be able to rely on it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the English. So on the World Law Dictionary, the languages kind of have flags on them to show the jurisdiction. The flag for English is the American flag.
Yes, isn't that horrible? Yes. Actually, that's going to be remedied, I promise, Louise. It's funny, we originally wrote a learner's dictionary of law in English, only an English dictionary, with all the things you talked about, pronunciation guides and common mistakes and things like that. And that was the basis for the World Law Dictionary. So the Learner's Dictionary, just the English dictionary was first, and then we added the translations and the comparative law notes for the other languages. And when we wrote the Learner's Dictionary, we wrote an English dictionary that had both American and British. And where they differed, there were little notes at the bottom saying, in Britain it's called this, and in America it's called that. So, but now we've decided what we're going to do is we're going to relaunch, and we're in the process of getting that done. So a British English law dictionary and an American English, and then there'll be a Canadian, South African, Australian, New Zealand, because it's really jurisdiction based. And as I said before, we have a Brazilian law dictionary and a Portuguese dictionary, because even Portuguese differs from Brazilian Portuguese. Apparently the number is around 10%. So I know when I was in Quebec, they said about 10% of the Quebecois dictionary words are different from the French terms. And then you have German and Swiss German and Austrian German. And so all these variants, somewhere around 10% of the legal terminology seems to differ. So the British and American do differ. So you could be a Brazilian lawyer wanting to translate something into British English, or you could be a Portuguese lawyer wanting to translate something into American English. So eventually we will have English law dictionaries for every jurisdiction.
Yeah, it's incredibly ambitious, but it's like a really much needed resource, we can say.
It is an ambitious project, but now it's up and running. I mean, now we have languages launched and we have enough universities on board that I'm confident that we'll see it to the end. I mean, I won't live long enough to see it to the end. None of us will, because it really will go on for generations.
Yeah. I mean, potentially you could do every jurisdiction in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the point. That's what you want to do. I mean, we have a partner in Colombia. We have partners all over the world in countries, and even things that you would never even think of. I recently was in contact with an association in India for deaf people hearing impaired, for sign language. And they've done legal terminology for sign language for India. And they would like to have their content in the World Law Dictionary. So we're in discussions with them now about doing that.
Wow. How do you do that?
Well, they have videos. They make videos showing the signing, and then it'd be linked to, the English dictionary. So you would see the video of the person signing, and then you'd link it to the English. And then even we have a program called the Indigenous Languages Program, where we're talking now to universities in South Africa and in Norway and about there are indigenous languages all over the world, and offering it to people access to the World Law Dictionary free of charge. South Africa, for example, is a huge issue because English is only spoken natively by a small percentage of the population, but it's a dominant language there in law and commerce. But actually the tribal languages are much bigger. So now there's a big push to make the legal system more accessible in South Africa for people in their own tribal languages. So the World Law Dictionary could help there. So yeah, it should eventually be for every jurisdiction, every country in the world.
I also wanted to mention, because I've made an announcement, I've told my listeners that we have a collaboration with the World Law Dictionary, which is also another exciting collaboration. So my listeners know that in my podcast Pro material, they get access to vocabulary lists, taking the vocabulary that I've used in the podcast episodes where it's legal related. Mm-hmm. And then they get access to these lists that have got kind of definitions. And yeah, I'm very pleased that now those lists have got the World Law Dictionary definitions in them, which has made them much better. And we've also got a promo. So for listeners, a very great, nice promotion. You can get discount on the TransLegal World Dictionary if you go to translegal.com and then you sign up and you use the code SLE15. You'll get a 15% discount on the TransLegal World Dictionary. You should definitely sign up as soon as possible, because The sooner you sign up, the sooner you will get more accurate definitions. So thank you, Michael. It's been very nice talking to you today about TransLegal and about the World Law Dictionary, and I'm sure the listeners are very enlightened about these very nice opportunities for them to improve their legal English. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Louise. It's been a pleasure today talking.
Thank you. And I know you're not very active on social media, right?
Personally?
Yeah.
No, I try to keep that to a minimum. The minimum being 0.
Michael's not into social media, I'm afraid, listeners. But TransLegal are on social media. So you can check out TransLegal on social media. I mean, just search for TransLegal. You're going to find them on various platforms.
I am on LinkedIn.
You're on LinkedIn. Do you ever open LinkedIn, Michael?
I open it when someone asks to be connected to me. That happens a lot. And then I usually say yes, and then I close it quickly.
Fantastic. Okay, so, I mean, if you do want to connect with Michael, he is on LinkedIn, and he may, if you catch him at the right time when he opens his LinkedIn profile, you'll be able to connect with him. And maybe, I know that he's a very busy man, because we're talking about the CEO here of TransLegal, you know, very busy, high profile, but very approachable. So, you know, you might be able to ask him a question directly.
Yeah, of course I answer questions. Sure. Yeah.
Fantastic. Good. So thanks for listening, and see you next time.
Thank you, Louise. Take care.
Great. So that's the end of this episode. I hope it was helpful and you learned something new. Do get in touch with Michael on LinkedIn if you've got any direct questions for him, and send me an email or get in touch with me if you've got any general questions about this episode. You can contact me on social media. Search for the Study Legal English group on Facebook or at Legal Englisher on Instagram. You can also contact me on email via louise@studylegalenglish.com. Make sure that you keep listening to future episodes to find out more about the course that I'll be teaching with TransLegal. I'll be sure to make announcements soon. So thanks for listening, and see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Study Legal English podcast. If you really want to get ahead, why not become a member and gain access to many learning resources? Visit studylegalenglish.com/pricing.